Okay, so we're now going to discuss on how are we going to work with RESTful API in Next.js. Okay, so in the previous video I have presented, so I have shown you a diagram on how our web app and the API is going to communicate. Actually, not only with the web app, but also with the other platforms like mobile app or a desktop application. Okay, and also with a database. Okay, so just a recap. So we have here our web, our Next.js, and we are going to work with an external API. Okay, although Next.js, with Next.js, we could actually work an API also inside our Next.js. But what I'm going to present to you now is we are going to have an API separate from the location of our web app, and we are going to use a PHP for our API. Okay? And here would be our Next.js. But in this video, I'm not going to have first our database. So we're just going to work with an API, and how are they going to communicate our app, our web app, and the API with a different language. Okay, so here we're going to use Next.js, and on our API we're going to use PHP. Okay, so I know that all of you now has a background on PHP, so I'm not going to have a review anymore on the PHP language. Okay, so our web app is going to send a request to our API. Take note of the term request. Then the API, after processing that request, it is going to return an object, what we call as response. Okay, so take note, they are of different locations. Okay, so I'm just going to close the window, and we're going to go to our so this is now our Next.js app. Okay, and I have created here inside the sum folder, which is my web server is located. Okay, so I'm going to host my API inside my sum folder, particularly in htdocs. Then I created a folder named coc. Then inside my coc folder, I have created a folder named API. So take note of the path. So this would be the location of the API. Okay, I have created here a simple API named hello.php. Okay, but what is important now is we have here the URL would be localhost/coc/API. Okay, then slash hello.php. Okay, so I have now opened my hello.php here. Okay, so I have a template here. Okay, and if ever I'm going to access, by the way, hello, I'm going to access first. So from here, so it would be from localhost/coc, give it there, hello.php, coc/API/hello.php. Enter. So we have here, this is the API. Okay, that's the message I have posted here. Okay, so take note of the locations. Okay, so my API is located at localhost/coc/API/hello.php, and my web app is located still on localhost but in port 3000. So basically, they are of different locations. Okay, two different websites, but then they are going to communicate through a package or a library that I'm going to introduce to you later on. Okay? Okay. So how are we going to access an external website just like our API? Okay. So we are going to use a library named Axios. Okay, so Axios is actually free to use. Okay, so what we are going to do here is, so that we could use Axios into our Next.js application, is we are going to install it by using the command npm install Axios. In my case, I have already installed it in my here. Okay, I have now Axios, so that I would to determine if we have the Axios. So we just go to the node modules, then try to find here. I have now my Axios in my node module. So therefore, it is now installed in my system. Okay. So after you have installed Axios, then you could use it by importing it first with the statement import Axios from Axios. Okay. This is the library, by the way, that we are going to use again to access an external website. In our case, an API. Then how are we going to use Axios to access external API? Okay, so I have here two different ways on how are you going to do it with get. By the way, if you can still remember, when we are going to define a form in HTML, it could be either post, get, delete, or put. Okay, but in our case, we are going to have first get. So meaning when you say get, we are just going to retrieve data from our API. Okay, so first is we are going to define our URL, the location of the API. Okay, so after you have identified the URL, then we are going to define a response object. Okay, then we're going to use the syntax axios.get, then just specify the URL, and it is going to access then, example, this hello.api, then await. Okay, since it is going to get data from external location, so therefore we must have to issue the command await. So meaning, if ever I have a command here, let us say command 1 or command 2 and 3 and so on. Okay, so command 1 is not going to be executed until this command here is done. Okay, so meaning we are going to await until this command could return a value, either an error or a data, into our response object. That's only the time it's going to execute the next command. Okay, and the other one is with parameters, but later on I'm just going to have that one. Okay, so first I want to go to my API. Okay, this is a message from the API. Okay, by the way, first is we have two headers. The first header here is actually it is going to define the content type. Okay, it would be a JSON. Okay, pure text. Okay, so it is going to send pure text. Okay, then the header, another header, access control allow origin asterisk, meaning it is going to allow all access from all locations or from any websites. Okay, so we're not going to put any security as of this moment. Okay, because if ever we're not going to have this header, we are going to get the course error, cross origin, something like that. Okay, error, course. Okay, so those are our two headers. Then we have an echo command. In PHP, echo means display. So, but then this echo here is going to return actually this one here to the calling application. Okay, so since our Next.js app, our web app is going to call this API, so therefore our web app is going to receive this message. Okay, so I'm going to save our API, then I'm going to call okay, but before having it here, okay, I have here, this is what we call as API tester. Okay, so I want you to install Postman to your uh, VS Code, or you could download Postman from the internet for a separate application. But in my case, I have Postman installed into my uh, VS Code, so I'm just going to, oops, I'm going to sign in. Hopefully, I still have my account. Oh no, sign in. Okay. So I think I could use now my Postman. Now, it is actually better to use Postman, okay, in checking or testing our API if it actually functions the way as you want it to be, okay? Because sometimes if ever that we're going to test this directly uh, into our web app, sometimes we go into some confusions with the errors, okay? So so that we are sure that our API is functioning properly, we're going to test it with Postman. Okay, so we have the different methods here. Get, okay, we are going to use get. Then I'm going to have my URL, localhost slash coc slash API, then slash hello.php. Now I don't have any parameters, so therefore I'm just going to set the method as get and the URL. Then send. I should see here then the response. Okay, so you can see here the response. This is a message from the API. Okay, in which that's the message I have written into my API. So therefore, our API is working properly. Okay, so if ever it's working properly, so therefore, we could test now with our code in Next.js. Okay, so first is we're going to import axios from axios. Okay, then okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to create a button, okay, and on click I'm just going to have a get data method, get data. Then before the return, I'm going to create const a function get data, okay, that is going to I'm just going to have it get data from API. Okay, get data from API. Okay, then I'm going to display below the button the message. Okay, so since I'm going to display, so therefore I'm going to use let's say I'm just going to call it message. Okay, set message use state. Okay, so as you can see, automatically it imported use state. So if since we are going to use a use state, so we're going to have use client. Okay, so I'm going to display here our message. Okay, I'm going to have H5. Okay. Okay, get data, then we are going to display here whatever message will be the return message. Oops. So to use Axios, first we are going to define our URL. Okay, URL is equal to HTTP localhost /coc/ API / hello.php. Okay. So after that, we are going to create a response object is equal to axios.get, then we have the URL. Okay. But since, as I've said, Axios is an asynchronous function, so therefore we must have to, or asynchronous operation, so therefore we must have to await. Okay, so when you say asynchronous operation, meaning it is going to take a while before this operation is going to finish. Okay, so we're going to have await, but as you can see here, we have an error on the await command, and as I'm going to point my mouse pointer, await are only allowed with asynchronous function. So therefore, I'm going to define my function as asynchronous because we have an asynchronous command here. Okay, so I'm going to have here the async statement. Okay, so the error is now removed. Okay, so once we are done with the get operation, so the next thing that we are going to do then is we are going to display here, or we're going to update the message. So set message, okay, then response dot data. Data is the data actually returned by the API. Okay, so by the way, I am not having any error trapping as of now. Okay, so that we could fully understand the steps on how are we going to use Axios to get data from the API. But take note, it is possible along the way there will be an error. But again, as of now, we're just going to forget error trapping. Okay, save. So once I'm going to click on get data, then it is going to display here the message from the API. Click. So we have here now, this is a message from the API. Okay, so if ever I'm going to change, this is a message, I'm going to say hello there. This is a message from the API. Save. Okay, as I'm going to click again on the get data, so you could see there it is now updated. So therefore, we have successfully retrieved the data from our API. Okay. So next is we have another syntax. How about with parameters? Okay. By the way, use the .data property for the data returned by the API. Okay. So we have here URL, then comma, then we are going to set the parameters. Okay. So in the form of JSON format. Okay. So for example, I am going to send the data here. Okay, I'm going to send a parameter into my API. Okay, so I'm going to have first here, let us say I'm going to send my name. Okay, so comma, then we're going to have the parameters. As you can see for the syntax, we are going to enclose it with curly brace, then the parameters. Okay, so by using now the command params. Okay, params, then another curly brace. I'm just going to have, let us say I'm going to have name, then Marcus Lanzunes. Okay, I'm just going to send a single parameter. If ever you have another parameter, you could just have here a comma, then another parameter. Let's say parameter 2 and so on. Okay. Okay, so I am going to send the parameter name. Okay, I'm going to save. Then my API, how are we going to get the parameter, which is name? So, since it is get, I'm going to have here ngalan, name is equal to super global get. I know you're familiar with this one. Then we have name. Okay, so this name here is the parameter name. Okay, but if ever I'm going to say my name, okay, so therefore here I'm going to use my name. Okay, then I'm going to have here hello name. Okay, so this name here now is actually this name here. Okay, hello in my example there is I have Macuse. Okay, so hello Macuse, this is a message from the API. So I'm going to save. Then from here, get data. So you could see there, this is now the data. Okay, we have sent to the API. Okay, so I hope you get the procedure and how are we going to send and receive data. Okay, I'm going to save for your reference later on. And for the API, because we are going to have another example. Okay, so next is that I'm going to send a list. Okay, we're going to deal now with list from our API. Okay, so how are we going to, let us say I'm going to issue here students. Okay, so I'm going to have here a list. So this is now a list from with PHP. Then within that we are going to have another let us say name. Then I'm going to have merchants. I'm just going to let's boss merchants. Okay, then balance, then the fat arrow, then let us say 1000 and comma. Okay, so actually the same with my previous example, except that we are now getting our data from an external source. So the data source is external. Okay, boss merchants, then Binime, balance is 12, Marcuse, then let's say 900, Rasi Malks 1000, 100. Okay, so then I'm going to echo students. Okay. So what I'm trying to do here is I'm sending now a list of names of students with names and balances. Okay, I'm just going to have it name as students. Now, in real world, it is possible, in a real application, I mean, it is possible that this would be coming from a database. Okay, but as of now, we don't have any databases yet, so therefore, I'm just going to create a constant, okay, list of students. Then I have here the echo. Okay, I'm going to try it first with my this one. Okay, so again, this is my API tester. So since I'm going to just get without any key, without any parameters, so therefore I'm just going to set same, by the way, same hello.php. Yes, I'm just going to use hello. Okay, then get. Then I'm going to click on send. Actually, there. Oh. Anyway, I'm expecting this one. There is an error. It is an error from. It is actually an error from the API. So as you can see, we have now in the PHP alone we have an error. Okay, so that is why it's good actually to test it first in Postman before testing it into our application. Okay, what's the error here? Array to string conversion. Okay, because what I want you to take note is echo. The syntax of echo is echo then string. Okay, so therefore students must be a string, but in our case here, students is an array. Okay, so we must have to convert students, okay, into a string before we could use our echo here. So how are we going to convert an array into a string? So we have here JSON encode. Okay, so we are going to convert the list of students into a JSON format. Okay, so I'm going to save this up here, then send again. So you could see here now the output, okay, in JSON format. It is the first record, then the second, and the others. Okay, so it has now returned a JSON string. Okay, JSON JavaScript object notation. So it is a format where different applications can send and receive data. Okay, so we have now no problem with our API. So next is we're going to modify our we have it here, page.js. Okay, so we don't have a parameter, so therefore I'm just going to remove my parameter. Okay, and set message response data. Okay, let us just try. Okay, what is the output here? Save, then here, then get data. So I have an error. Objects are not valid as a React child. Okay, why? It found object with keys, name, and balance. So therefore, we have successfully received our data, the array. But the problem here is we have an error in displaying our the retrieved data. Okay, so one way to do it, by the way, is I'm just going to convert this one into a string, because when the API returned a string, Axios, as it's detected, it is on a JSON format, so it is going to automatically convert it into an array. So that is why here we are going to convert it into a string. So JSON.stringify our response.data. So it is now a string. So therefore, we could see now let's wait a little while. Then get data. So you could see here now our string. Okay? String, but still in JSON format. Okay? In our ordinary user, they could not understand what does this message means. Okay? So, what I want now is I'm going to display all of this in a table. Just like what we did last in our previous video. Okay? So therefore, I'm not going to stringify because since I'm going to display it on the table, okay? So therefore, I'm going to create here a list. Okay? Const students list, comma, set students list. Okay, equal to use state. But as of now, we are going to use a list or an array. Okay. By the way, we are not going to have the message anymore. So therefore, I'm going to remove my set message. And here, instead of message, we are going to use our students list. Okay. But since we are going to display it on the table, so therefore, on my H5, I'm just going to have H2. I'm going to display list of students with balances. Okay. This is H2. Then after that, I'm going to display the table. Okay. Again, I have no CSS. I have no design because I want you to understand first the procedure before we're going to go with our CSS or page design. Okay. So I'm going to have the students list that map. And as I've said, we're going to put it in a table. By the way, I'm going to have a table. Then inside my table, I'm going to have my t-body. Then inside my t-body, that's the time that I'm going to have okay. Okay, that map. Then we're going to have the student, comma, index, because we're going to use our index later on in our key. Then we have our function. Okay. So here we're going to return. Then we are going to have a tr. Okay. Our tr, by the way, must have key is equal to our index. Okay. Then we're going to have td. Okay, so again, the name and the balance. Okay. So I'm going to have here, I'm using here the object student. Okay, this one here, student dot name. Okay, and another table data, and I'm going to have the student dot balance. Okay, so as you could see here, we have name and balance. Name, balance, and so on. Okay. So name and balance, then okay. I think that's all. Oh, wait. So this is how are we going to display the students list into a table. Okay? But then how are we going to update our students list? So we have it here. So this is to get the data from the API, then we have set students list, then response dot data. This response dot data is actually the data uh, sent by the API. Okay, let us try if this is correct. Okay, list of students with balances, and as I'm going to click on get data, it should display now the names and balances of the students. Get data, so you could see there the names, they are now inside a table. Okay. Okay, so that we could complete our table. By the way, so I'm going to have T head. Then inside our T head is we have our TR. Then we have TH name and another TH balance. Okay, save, so you can see we have here now the name and the balance. Okay, so if ever you have a more sophisticated look for our table, so you could use any CSS frameworks. Okay, but as of now, again, I'm not going to use any CSS so that you could concentrate on the steps on how are we going to work with an API. Okay, so let us say for the last topic, I'm just going to have let us say I'm going to ask for a parameter. Okay, I'm going to use a yearLevel. For example, I'm just going to have say yearLevel is equal to super global get then I'm going to have yearLevel. Okay, because I'm going to validate if ever if YL is equal to 1. Let us say if ever first year, I'm going to send this set of students. Okay, a very basic example. Let's see. I'm going to have Ralph and okay. Okay, so if ever the parameter is equal to 1, the yearLevel as a parameter is equal to 1, then I'm going to send all of these. But if ever not first year, so we're going to send only to, let us say these are third year students or upper years, Ralph and Mira. Okay, save. Then from here, we are going to send a parameter, comma, then no, params it is yearLevel. Okay, so you have here yearLevel level. Let's say I'm going to have first year 1. Okay, I'm going to send 1. Save. Okay, it must return. Okay. Okay, so we have it there. Okay. Now, how about if ever I'm going to, let us say, I'm going to send 2. So therefore, by the way, I'm going to test it with, so that you could see how are we going to test it here with the Postman. So we have here the params, since it is get, so I have here the params. I'm going to have here the year level. Oh, I have a problem with then I'm going to have 2. Okay, then send. Undefined array key. Oh, year level. Okay, send. Okay, so Ralph and Mira. Okay, so but if ever the year level is equal to 1, send. Okay, so we have the 4 students. Okay, so we have now no problem with our page, no, with our API. So let's try. Save. Then here, get data, so you could see the third year students, or maybe upper year students. Okay. So hopefully you have fully understood how are we going to communicate or work with an external website. In our example here is an API. Our external website is actually an API. Okay, so most probably the next topic then would be with databases, because as of now, as I've said, we are only simulating the data, the records, in the form of directly in a list. Okay, but actually in a real application, this would be coming from a database. Okay, so that's all for this video, and I'll see you on the next one.